And what you can notice here, we're actually logged in to the version of a network automation demonstration system here. There's two ways we can control access. First of all, by the user account and the role we give the user in terms of what you can do in the environment. You'll see this later. I can't actually make any changes in the environment because I'm a slightly reduced permissions on the environment. Second thing is, you see on the right-hand side here, we can actually segment the network into groups of devices. And those groups of devices can be built from, for example, network segments. They can also be grouped together in terms of business context. For example, the devices that control a particular application or associated with a particular application. So we can give permissions to users to control certain segments of the network as well as the level of which they have access. And this is important, particularly in an MSP environment where you may have multiple customers hosted on the same infrastructure, yet you have different administrators looking after particular customers' environments. I just want to give you a very high-level overview. What we're looking at here is what we call the network analysis here. Now, there's a number up here in the left-hand side here. This is an overall score of the health of the environment. The numeric is not important. It's the change to that numeric over time that's important that you need to watch. Why? As issues come in, we rate that as an overall context score. And that context score rolls up all the analysis that's been done on the network, which is, by the way, proactive. And I'll touch upon that in a moment. And the point of that is that you get an overall quick picture of how well or how badly I'm doing against that overall score that I would like to attain, obviously as high as possible. So the number's not important, it's a change over time that's important. So what we're seeing here is some analysis over time of a particular set of policies we've applied onto the environment. Those policies are based upon the configuration that we've seen on the devices under management. How does that work? And I'm going to touch on that before we go into the actual demo itself. We do two things. We obviously scan the network for the devices that are associated. There's various ways to do that. One is SNMP, another is ping sweeping, for example, to actually pick up the devices that are connected to the network. So that's one element of the basic inventory we have of the network. What devices we have connected, where are they, what are their IP addresses, and the interconnects between them. The second level is we go deep into the device configuration by credentialed access onto the device, and we do two things. First of all, we watch the syslogs on the device itself. And the reason we watch the syslogs is if a change actually occurs, rather than doing a polled analysis based upon a periodic analysis in the network, we see changes that trigger a scan of the device. And why is that important? If a change occurs that creates an outage, we want to actually find that the configuration change that caused the outage very, very quickly. So by doing that quick scan of the device by the credentialed access, based upon the event that occurred in the syslog, we'll get a rapid analysis of what may have changed in the environment. So what we're seeing here in this overall dashboard here is a score change over time to see whether anything's changed on the network that may have caused a problem. We've got a fairly stable network here, so nothing's changed in the past few hours on here. And by the way, you're seeing this as of 7 o'clock this morning. That's actually based on the West Coast here. So in fact, if I refresh that probably should get us back up to date. And you'll notice that we're now up at 8 o'clock. So the scans on an hourly basis. So let's have a quick look at some information here. If I actually take a set of policies, we mentioned policies. I'm going to try and combine a combination of compliance with general change detection as we go through. So what I'm going to have a quick look at first of all here is we're running a PCI analysis against certain devices in our network, and you can see from this overall representation that not only we've got some devices that have some issues, these errors here. By the way, we rate the actual rule sets by a grade of an error, a warning, and just informational. We also see changes over time, over a period of time, that may have affected the network itself. For example, here we had quite a bit of activity here a few days ago on the network itself. So obviously we can drill back into the history and look at that, but I'm not going to focus on that specifically today. Let's pick an individual switch router here and look first of all at what issues we see on the environment. What this is doing is just refreshing the report I ran earlier on, and it's listing out the individual checks that have been done. Now, we're taking PCI as an example, but it could be an individual security rule check, a basic configuration check. We can even check to the level of the update on the iOS level on the device for Cisco devices and Junos for Juniper devices, for example. And here we see some issues, some errors, and some warnings, and some passes as we go through. So I just want to drill down into this report quickly and show you that a number of checks have been performed. And let's take a very simple one to begin with. Here we have an issue with the boot P server. So I'll take a look at that one in a moment, the actual detail of the actual report itself. So that's one example. Another example further down here is probably a common one is just a warning related to NTP configuration. So we can rate the actual rules as associated to the severity in the environment. So let me just scroll down here a second, and I get down to the boot P example. So you can see what we're actually checking. Sorry about scrolling down slowly. I just want to make sure I don't get past it. Here's the boot P one specifically. And this one is actually performing a very simple check. It's saying that there is basically a config file setting that actually basically should contain either one of two things. One of no boot P server or a DHCP boot P server. The importance of this is it uses basic simple checks at the configuration file level to detect how the environment's configured. And it could be as simple as checking for a boot P server, so as simple as checking for example, there's NTP or HTTP servers running on the particular device itself, or it can be way more complicated than that. It can check the type and version of the iOS, for example, and what the configuration settings are. The idea of building up this picture is to say, here's my rule set, and do I comply with that particular rule set? And what can we do about that? There's two or three things we can do. We can set an automatic remediation, so we reapply a standard configuration against that. We fix that one atomic issue, or we even give the user the ability to run a script, a manually created script against that environment to remediate that issue. The importance there, again, is automation. If you trust the system to do it, you can actually detect the change and then automatically remediate by reapplying, for example, a gold image configuration against that system. Or you can be notified, as David says, through Spectrum, and then take appropriate action manually and then reassess the environment. The other thing that we build up is a picture of the network. And I'm going to use this as a description of how we define things like VLANs, etc., in the environment. Here we see a picture of the small number of devices in this small network here. It's a pretty picture, yes, but more importantly, we can drill into, for example, the complete configuration of a particular device. If I click on here, I can actually go in and look at everything from the issues detected, the policy violations, even down to the configuration of the particular device. An example of this on a switch is which VLANs are configured, where are they connected to, what endpoints are they connected to, and there's one here, for example. We can actually walk the VLAN connections if we wish to do so, which routing configuration we have, etc. So very deep, detailed configuration that we can detect. The other thing we can look at is changes over time. If we actually go back to the Config Explorer here, what this allows us to do is actually look at this particular device, whether it be a switch, a router, even down to an IP phone device, and actually look at the current running configuration. And we can even compare that, let's say, with a saved archived copy and run a compare to look at the diff between them. Why is this so important? We're looking for change in the environment. We mentioned earlier on that outages can often occur because of a bad change in the environment. If this has been applied to a particular device, you can go back and look at the current running configuration versus what it was a day ago, 2 days ago, whatever it happens to be, to see what change had occurred that could have created that outage. So the difference between that in context, not just a one-line differ saying this is changed, but in the context of, in this instance, there's an SNMP server community string that's changed, and consequent to that, you've got it in context of what has actually changed in the environment. Again, we can remediate that. We can either apply the old copy of the config file over the top of the current running config, or we can make an atomic change using a very simple scripting language to do so. Given the time that we've got, that's all I wanted to touch upon very quickly. We have obviously some very comprehensive reporting capability, and what I'd like to do is just show you a couple of reports. David mentioned the policy compliance summary. Here we see a report that can be easily provided to your auditors to say, for example, you're out of compliance in this instance, what are the issues, and what activities you have done to remediate this, or not, as the case may be. Basically, the idea of this is to provide your auditors the upper level view, and they can drill into the details itself. We can look at changes over time on a device, and I've got a couple of reports run here as well. Here's an example, another policy analysis that's being done on the ASA firewall policies over a period of time, and you notice we've got some ads in the history here. Fortunately, we're still in policy, but we actually have some 16 errors on this device that we should investigate. Again, detect that change, detect the errors in the environment, allow you to remediate as appropriate.